and back with Stardom and Situm for Week 12 with the Michael F. Florio. Go check it out, NFL.com/Florio. See all of his full work. As you know, he's our Triple Crown winner, just week after week, delivering the starts and sits that you need. We're going to start with quarterbacks, as is customary, and one Tua Tagovailoa. Could we possibly be sitting Tua this week?
Yeah, I think we should be sitting Tua Tagovailoa this week. And let me preference it by saying he's not a must-sit. But there's a lot of quarterbacks I mentioned in the article that you could go and check to see if you have on your team. But I don't think people realize the floor is lower with Tua than a lot of people think. 6 times he's failed to score 18. He's been the QB 17 since week 7. He struggles in cold weather with 11 fantasy points in his career in sub-50-degree weather conditions. The Jets are the best secondary in football. They're not going to score a whole lot of points with Tim Boyle at their quarterback. I think this could be a low-scoring game for the Dolphins and their offense. So if you have another option with no teams on bye, I think it's okay to pull Tua from your line.
Not projecting a score fest against Tim Boyle. We've been waiting to see Tim Boyle get in there. What about Lamar playing right over there against the Chargers? Are we starting Lamar in Week 12?
I'm starting Lamar Jackson, and I know that the Ravens going off for over 30 points every week hasn't always translated to big fantasy production for Lamar, but this is the match where I think it definitely happens. The Chargers have allowed the most passing yards and fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. They've also given up the most rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks, and 7 different times have allowed 20 or more fantasy points to the position. We know Lamar will run, and if the Chargers offense could actually put up some points against this Ravens defense, he might have to throw more than usual as well.
I love how Mark Andrews was in all of those highlights just in an effort to break my heart. We'll leave Lamar and go to Sam Howell playing on Thanksgiving against the Dallas Cowboys. Are you starting him against Dallas's defense?
He has been amazing for fantasy purposes, but I think we sit him this week because of the matchup. Again, no teams on bye, so it's easier to find a replacement option. Sam Howell leads the league in passing yards, but he also leads the league in interceptions, and he has been the most sacked quarterback in the NFL. The Cowboys generate the pressure at the highest rate, the second most sacks. They are 4th in interceptions and have allowed the second fewest passing yards per game. So it is just a really tough matchup, and again, with no teams on bye, you probably have another, like you didn't draft Sam Howell to be your QB1 all year. You have another quarterback hopefully on your roster. I think you could just make that swap for this week.
May have to drop back a whole lot. He's solved some of the sack problems. Dallas is a little bit different in terms of pressuring the quarterback. Let's get to some running backs. The king has not necessarily been in the past few weeks. We start in Derrick Henry.
It's hard to keep a king down for too long. I think you start Derrick Henry largely because he's playing the Panthers. And last week, Tony Pollard had a get-right game against Carolina, and I think that's exactly what Derrick Henry can do. Carolina has allowed the most rushing touchdowns. They are top 5 in rushing yards and receiving touchdowns allowed to running backs. Henry has been much better at home this year than on the road, but with it being 2 rookie quarterbacks, I expect a lower scoring game. It'll be competitive. I don't think you have to worry about Henry getting game scripted out, which has been kind of what has caused some of his down games in the past. So I think this is a safe week to go and get the king back into your starting line.
As exciting as the start to the Levis era was, we kind of into the rookie doldrums at this point in Nashville. Let's go to James Cook. How do you feel about the Bills running back?
Look, I said to sit Tua. I'm sure I'm saying to sit other players that you think I'm a homer. Sit James Cook this week. Don't call me a homer anymore. But the thing is, look, James Cook looked good last week. I think Joe Brady could be a good thing for James Cook the rest of the way. His arrow on the season is pointing up. But he gets the Eagles this week. And Philly, they've allowed just 1 top 12 running back, and that was when they let Breece Hall intentionally score a touchdown late at the end of the game. They've allowed the fewest yards, fewest fantasy points per game to running backs, and you can't rely on a touchdown with James Cook, so you're hoping for yardage against the team that allows the fewest of them. With no teams on bye, I think you pull him out of your starting lineup this week.
Stop calling Mike like Mike likes the Bills, okay? You like things too. It doesn't change how we do our particular analysis about a game or a team or a player. Let's talk about Jaylen Warren. The Steelers running back popped that long one. Are we coming back to the Steelers offense? No Matt Canada anymore, Mike.
The only Steeler I will start this week is Jaylen Warren. If you go to the article, the whole sit section is Pittsburgh Steelers. But Jaylen Warren, 13 runs of 10-plus yards in the last 3 weeks alone. That is more than Najee Harris has on the entire season, and that comes into play this week because the Bengals have allowed the most explosive runs this season. They've also allowed a top 7 fantasy running back in 5 of their last 7 games, and they're new offensive coordinators. It's 2 different guys, but they both have a set of eyes. I think you watch the Steelers play and you're like, yeah, Jaylen Warren is the best running back on this team. We need to get him the ball more.
All right, and you'll be able to watch the wide receivers and the tight ends coming up in our show. If you want some more bonus starts and sits at quarterback and running back, why don't we go ahead and focus intently on the screen that you're viewing us on. We appreciate that. Dak Prescott, Kyler both starts, as are Joe Mixon and Kyren Williams. Glad to see you back. And then there's Russell Wilson, Matthew Stafford, A.J. Dillon, and Alexander Mattison, all sits. Jalen Waddle, are we starting him against the Jets?
No surprise I said to sit as quarterback, but I think you sit Jalen Waddle this week. And look, I don't think people realize, again, another Dolphin, that their floor is lower than I think a lot of people realize. 2 games with over 15 fantasy points this year, and he has not topped 70 yards since week 3. But almost 80% of his routes come out wide, and the majority of them are on the left side. That's Sauce Gardner territory. Even when he's on the right side, he's going to get DJ Reed. The Jets are just the worst matchup for a wide receiver. You're still playing Tyreek Hill because he is a god. But besides that, I think you can go and get Jalen Waddle out of your lineup this week.
All right, we'll go from Jalen Waddle to a guy who's literally the only option. We got to go back to like Jericho Cotchery in Carolina for a similar wide receiver situation. Are we starting Adam Thielen?
They should call up Steve Smith, man. Like, he can go and immediately help them. We are starting Adam Thielen, and I had Thielen as a sit last week, but then the play caller changed, and that changes everything. When Frank Reich is calling the plays, Thielen averages over 20 fantasy points per game, and it's just 11 per game in the 3 games that Reich was not calling the plays. The Titans have allowed the 6th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. They struggle against slot receivers, which is where Thielen runs about 2/3 of his routes. Yeah, you could comfortably get him back into your starting lineup even with no teams on bye.
All right, one of the better receivers in the league the past couple of years. Just his quarterback situation hasn't necessarily been great. Are we starting Amari Cooper in this game in Week 12?
This one breaks my heart because I have Amari Cooper on so many fantasy teams, but I'm sitting him, and I think you should do the same. He does not have a touchdown and has averaged 8.8 fantasy points per game in games without Deshaun Watson this year. And it's not just that. He runs over 80% of his routes out wide. Patrick Surtain lines up exclusively out wide, but unlike Sauce Gardner, he bounces from both sides of the field. So we could see Surtain just shadowing Amari Cooper this week. In fact, Denver hasn't allowed a top 30 wide receiver since week 4. It hurts me, but you got to pull him from your lineup.
All right, sorry, Amari, you're going to the bench. Let's go over to some tight ends. This guy, yes, still counting as a tight end. You had him on a bye last week. Are we starting Taysom Hill?
Yeah, don't let the bye and then the down weird game when it was Carr and Jameis and all that make you forget just how good Taysom Hill has been for fantasy. Since week 7, he is the tight end 4, averaging over 16 fantasy points per game. You see on the screen right there, he has success against the Falcons in the past. They also have allowed the 4th most yards to tight ends this year, but it doesn't matter. Hill will play some tight end. He'll play running back. He'll be the goal line runner. He may even play quarterback and throw a couple of passes, and you get to start that player at the weakest position in fantasy football. The ceiling is very high. The floor might not be, but the upside is worth getting him in.
Yeah, you saw 3 Taysom Hill highlights. He was playing tight end in one of those. That's the kind of cheat code Taysom Hill is right now. A new offensive coordinator, also Pat Freiermuth, back this week. Does that mean we're starting him?
No. He's a Pittsburgh Steeler, so unless his name is Jaylen Warren, I want him on the bench this week. The thing is, if I told you Pat Freiermuth gave you under 7 fantasy points in all but 1 game this year, you'd be like, that's bad. He has 7 or fewer yards in every game but 1 this year. 14 targets in his 5 games combined. And in the last month, Kenny Pickett is averaging 116 passing yards per game and 1 touchdown. Not 1 touchdown per game. He has 1 passing touchdown in the last month. So until we see better things out of the Steelers passing attack, you could sit them all.
Yeah, and Mike Tomlin agrees. He says he just wants to see points. People ask him schematic. I just want to see points. We do too, Coach. We like fantasy football. All those folks who had Mark Andrews enjoying his success, maybe they ran out and got Isaiah Likely. Are they starting him in Week 12?
Yeah, I think you are. I picked him up in a whole bunch of leagues myself, and unless I have a really good starting option, I'm plugging him in and starting him. And the only option I have over him right now is Sam Laporta on those teams. 3 games last year without Mark Andrews or where Andrews left early. Likely topped 75 yards or scored a touchdown in all 3. He went for over 100 yards in one of them. He averages over 13 fantasy points per game in career games where he gets 5 or more targets. The Chargers allow a whole bunch of production to tight ends. I think this is a week to take the upside shot on Isaiah Likely.
All right, opportunity there. If he's still available, go out and check out what you can get in your league. Also starting from Baltimore in SoFi Stadium, Zay Flowers, according to Mike Calvin Ridley, gets a start. Starts for Dalton Schultz and Trey McBride and Kyler is a thing. Again, a Pittsburgh Steeler is going to be a sit. Nuke Hopkins, Tyler Higbee, and Hunter Henry.